Plants vs. Zombies Battle for Neighborville is in early access. And with that, there are obviously some issues that need to be talked about. So, I decided to make a critique about it. And in order to properly critique it, I want to make sure that we're on the same level. This game, as I see it, is not a sequel to Garden Warfare 2. I see it as a spiritual successor to the Garden Warfare series. It takes elements from those games, though they put a new twist on many of those elements. This mindset is how I decided to look at Battle for Neighborville and how I critiqued its multiplayer aspect. I wanted to focus on multiplayer right now because that is the core of the game, both to PopCap and its community. It's also what keeps most people playing the game, so it needs to be at its best so it can keep people playing. Later on, I may decide to critique its single player and review individual characters. Now, I want to start with the positives. While I mainly focus on critiquing the game and providing suggestions, I wanted to include these in if, by chance, PopCap watches this video, they're acknowledged in what they did right. So, first thing is definitely the more focus on teamwork and playing the objective. The new mechanics that are added, or existing mechanics that have changed, we're now encouraging teamwork. For example, reviving someone will be faster if multiple people revive together. The abilities of some characters also change to work with a team or support them. For example, Rose's Arcane Enigma now provides a speed boost to nearby teammates, Chronocoin's Butter Barrage has been replaced with a Butter Beacon, which reveals enemy locations, and All-Star Shield now provides a Dome Shield to protect others, and many more examples. As well, First Strike and Vanquish Master rewards have been removed and have been replaced with rewards that associate with playing the current mode's objective. For example, in Turf Takeover, defending or capturing the objective grants the Objective Master. The new upgrade system is much better, in my opinion. Rather than linear upgrades, where some were definitely better options than others, the upgrades can now suit different playstyles, and we now have a more variety in choosing how to play each character. Although I haven't upgraded someone higher than advanced myself, so I don't know if there are any super powerful upgrades or game-changing ones, I have seen some people change up a character from its intended playstyle. For example, on Reddit I saw someone using a support nightcap build being able to revive teammates faster in the invisible domes that they create. Some of these upgrades also aren't straight upgrades. A task needs to be done which requires some degree of skill, which I like. For example, faster cooldowns on abilities are granted after getting a critical vanquish. Although not all upgrades are like this, and some are direct upgrades are easy to retain, it's a step in the right direction, and it's still a very great thing. There have also been quality of life optimizations put in. The names of those who you vanquish now shows up near the middle of the screen, making it easier to tell if you vanquished someone and who you vanquished. The meters for certain abilities now show near the middle, so you don't have to look off too far from the middle of the screen in order to see it. The global vanquish indicator is also slightly moved, so you can see it better, and it's as well easier to tell who killed who because you can see what characters they're playing as. Chomper can now be properly and consistently damaged when he's about to eat someone. And in the new update, they added some new stuff that people asked and even didn't ask, and it's a very welcome addition. For example, the friend or foe outlines. It's helpful for easily identifying enemies or friends in the midst of battle. They added new visual effects to highlight the Sunflower and Pea Shooter when they're in turret mode. They skipped animations for rewarding presentations, and there are better ability icons which better describe the abilities. For example, the old versus the new dome ability for Nightcap. And finally, the bright and colorful maps are back. It's quite the refresher from seeing all the dull purples from Garden Warfare 2. Now into the main meat of the video. For some of these critiques, I propose some changes to fix these issues. The recent update that introduced Lawn of Doom and the balance changes feel rushed, and it seems that the team wants to stick to a schedule, but because of that, they introduce so many bugs and there's so many problems. It's nice that they want to keep on pushing out content, but I feel like it would be better to push it out later, but it's more optimized. Another potential bug is that on PC, it might be borderless mode that causes weird things to happen, and I know that's a little bit of a weird explanation, but I'll explain a bit deeper. When you're KO'd and we're able to look around, your mouse is also able to move outside of the window for some reason. It also happens with full screen and even one monitor. Sometimes the mouse movement would not be detected, and for me this happened at completely random. So I don't know about that. The cameras for Burrow, Huskop, and calling a Z-Mech, or any ability that requires a special animation, is very weird. It's disorienting. The camera locks to a specific point where you can only move it around a bit. So whenever I'm trying to burrow as Chomper, for example, or when I try to look around, the camera will force me to look down at the Chomper, causing me to lose a lot of vision on the battlefield. The ability and ammo HUD elements are rather small, and they're hard to see in the heat of battle. Abilities with special cooldowns like the Warp have really small cooldowns as well, and they're just super hard to see. Having some custom keybinds with long names like left shift covers a lot of the ability image and also covers those small cooldowns. The ammo count is also hard to see because it's tucked away in the corner. Thus it's hard to know when you're fully reloaded. So what I propose to change is to make the icons bigger, move them a little bit closer to the middle of the screen, and make it so the keybinds don't cover a lot of the icon. Most rapid fire attacks on many of the characters are too weak. I know that there are upgrades for those weapons, but I don't think we should entirely rely on upgrades to make our attack stronger, because what if you want to use some other upgrades to make them better? So the characters that are affected by this are Sunflower, Citron, Acorn, and Imp, but only slightly increased for Sunflower and maybe Citron. Sunflower should be able to defend herself a little bit, but still focus on supporting and healing the team. Same for Citron, because he's more of a supporter now. However, he should be able to defend himself and also take down some targets as well. And lastly, some other bugs that I didn't get to post yet on the forums. As Electric Slide, using custom keybinds will cause the third ability to display the wrong input or no input when using it. In Giddy Park, sometimes switching teams or respawning will cause your character to be invisible, and when you respawn, you won't be able to control the character at all. This also happens to teammates and enemy AI when they're invisible, and there are also infinite loading screens and anywhere really, entering the portal, opening the Halloween rewards, and even the Rewardertron sometimes. And sometimes you can't even move your character in the reward screen. There's no music playing sometimes during finales. The action hero bow charging up sound does not play sometimes. And when you're running as Super Brains, the Turbo Twister sound effect plays. And the list goes on. Before I go review the characters that I'd like to focus on, I wanted to talk a little bit about the character design. In general, the fact that they still stuck with the recognizable body types is great. It's good game design, since if you saw a silhouette of each character, you could probably still tell who's who, and thus from afar, you can also tell who's who. Characters returning from the Garden Warfare series are now redesigned to look more cartoony. Before, they were somewhat going for realism with the models, and I do like some of the changes that I made. The engineer is probably the goofiest change. His face when he runs, it's pretty hilarious. Anyway, to the characters. I reviewed only 5 because I feel like they're the ones that have the biggest issues or will be an issue in the future. I talk about the problems with them and how I want them to be changed. The other characters, I may leave them for other videos. First up, Nightcap. Even after the new changes to Nightcap, I still feel like she could use some changes. I personally dislike what PopCap did to Nightcap, as it seems like Fung Fu is being treated as Garden Warfare 2's Imkata, and we know how Imkata turned out. In order to think on how to balance Nightcap, we need to identify the problem with her. Previously, she was able to deal massive amounts of damage easily and sneak away most of the time. Shadow sneaking, Fung Fuing, and then shadow sneaking away was way too easy to do. Now, she is still able to do so, but to a lesser extent. Those combo of abilities are now easily escapable since both abilities give a delay. By then, the enemy player would have noticed you and will escape when priming the abilities, rendering the attack useless. I feel like it would be best to remove those delays, though obviously we can't just revert it to the way it was before. We need to make sure that it doesn't give out vanquishes that easily. So in general, Before, her toolset allowed her to get away with stupid decisions easily, but now the delay on her abilities makes Nightcap get noticed before she could get some damage done. What I propose to change is to encourage players to work for Nightcap's powerful tools and strategize. My philosophy of these changes is that I don't want to reduce the player's capabilities. I want to make sure that they work for their capabilities. In other words, I want to make sure the player has the most control over what they do. What Nightcap received are delays, and delays are something that the player cannot control. With my suggestions, I made sure to give players more control. In order to keep the player in control, and I know I've said control a lot, and encourage them to strategize, I've come up with these changes. So for Shadow Sneak, I want to change it to be similar to the Spy's Cloak from Team Fortress 2. The way it works in that game is that you can use the cloak and stop using it at any time, but there is a timer. The timer progress will carry over after decloaking and will slowly build up again. I want to apply this to Shadow Sneak. This is to make it so players will actually have to use their Shadow Sneak carefully. They have to save enough time to sneak in and snake out. The difference between the Spy Cloak and this: keep the current attribute where if you look hard enough, you can barely see Nightcap's footsteps, as opposed to in TF2, the spy is revealed if he is shot. For Feng Fu, I want to make it a build-up ability, and I'll explain. Some of you, when I say build-up, might think of ultimates from Overwatch, though I don't want to think of it that way. I want to compare it to the build-up abilities from, again, Team Fortress 2. In that game, there's another weapon called the Soda Popper, where it has the mechanic to allow the player to jump 6 times in the air. By default, the Scout, the character that uses this weapon, can only jump 2 times in the air. However, in order to be able to jump 6 times, the player must deal damage in 1 life to build up a meter. After that meter is full, the player can toggle it at any time and be able to jump 6 times in the air. So, applying this to Feng Fu, players will have to either build up enough damage or enough vanquishes in 1 life to be able to use it. And because of these changes, I want to increase the damage to the way it was before. With this change to Feng Fu, it reverts it back to the powerful tool it was, and now it encourages strategic use instead of using it as a panic button or spamming it. With all of these proposed changes, it makes it so players can still use Feng Fu and Shadow Sneak effectively, but not mindlessly. Careful use of these abilities will reward the players. Oak and Acorn. Right now, the problems I have with them is that it's still a better option to be Oak, even without some teammates. The Acorn's primary is too weak, and if you're an Oak, someone is bound to notice and will switch to Acorn to link up, making all of you stronger. The long transformation time and cooldown when tree-jected is good, though Space Cadet doesn't have those changes. It would be neat to just implement it to Space Cadet 2, but I feel like there's another way. The problem with changing the ease of transformation is that it may discourage players to be Oak, so I try to make my changes to still encourage the use of teaming up with your buddies. My proposed changes is to add a small build-up meter to transform, just like with Feng Fu. It must be small enough to still encourage transforming, but big enough so it's not easily accessible all the time. The meter will reset after dying or transforming. This will encourage players to transform more strategically. I also want to add more damage to the primary Acorn weapon, so that when you are not Oak, you are still a dangerous foe. As a positive side note, I do love Oak's face. It's pretty goofy. So with Space Cadet, it's a similar problem with Oak and Acorn. It's a way better option to be a space station even without teammates. There's no penalty for transferring detransforming, and even if you're a single space station, someone is bound to notice and switch to Space Cadet to link up. It's also hard to know if your hands-on torpedo was destroyed by someone, or if it exploded on its own or by your control. What I propose to do, just like what I suggested for Oak and Acorn, is to add a small build-up meter to transform. It must be small enough to still encourage transforming, but big enough so it's not easily accessible at the time. The meter will reset after dying and detransforming. This will encourage players to transform more strategically, and have Space Cadet still be a viable option outside of being a space station. There should also be an indication if your hands-on torpedo was destroyed by someone, or if it exploded on its own, or by your control. This is just a quality of life change, but it's pretty nice to have it. As a positive side note, I just love the idea behind her. The transformation is like the crazy creations I dreamt of as a kid. Just making contraptions by taking whatever I can, and not trying to make them look sleek or cool, just throwing stuff together. And the fact that you can look up with teammates, that's pretty cool. But with some cool characters, makes it so that other characters fall out of place. With Imp, comparing it to Space Cadet is just a better option to be a Space Cadet. Imp has a very long cooldown to its transformation, but Oak and Acorn and Space Cadet don't. She has better primary weapon damage, and her transformation has loads more survivability and more deadly tools. Heck, pairing up with people increases your health, damage, and effectiveness, and you can't do that as mech. For some reason as well, when your mech runs out of health, you won't die, you just eject. This almost defeats the purpose of ejecting, since you can just wait until your health goes down. The only difference is that you can vanquish plants by ejecting manually. Right now, if you want to play as the big robot, it's better to play as Space Cadet. Mech just needs to have some tools that suit it better and be different than Space Station, but be powerful in its own way. So what I propose to do is to have a build-up meter as well, and give it some tools that suit it and be different from Space Station. So adding a build-up meter will encourage a more strategic use of the mech, and don't have to wait for a long cooldown after dying or ejecting. The players will be able to use it at their own pace. Dying or having to eject melee after calling your mech won't be annoying, because you just kind of just wasted that ability. I said it before, but I'll say it again. The primary weapon damage for Imp should be increased, because the Imp should still be viable out of the mech. I think replacing Bionic Bash with another ability, something that Space Station can't do, is good. From Garden Warfare 2, I really enjoyed Shrimp's charge ability. Maybe that can be integrated too. Perhaps keep the attributes of Bionic Bash, but be able to launch the air like the Shrimp's ability. Space Station can't rush in, so maybe Mech could rush in too. There's no set idea on this, so maybe if you have an ability idea, I encourage you to share it. As a positive side note, I personally like the new mech look. It looks like it was put together in a garage with spare parts, and I dig that. And finally, Super Brains. He is a rather different character than he was from Garden Warfare 2. He still is a melee character, but he has options that allow him to expand to other roles. He could be a support by using his shield to protect others, and he can be a damage dealer, using his fist to take out enemies. Currently though, he doesn't feel like a melee character. His Ultra Flying Fist, the charge up fist attack that's ranged, allows him to deal damage from afar and do a better job than what the 80s action hero is supposed to do. What I propose to change is to nerf the Ultra Flying Fist to a point where it's still viable to use, but shouldn't be relied on all the time. Now, this is a bit tricky, because nerfing this too much would cause Super Brains to not be viable, as being restricted to only melee is a big problem in this game where there's a bunch of ranged weapons. I simply just want to make the time it takes to charge between the different levels much longer, and I want to make the time to hold the final charge limited, just like 80s action hero. This discourages the overuse of his range attack. He's supposed to be a melee character, but again, he can also expand to other roles. This also makes 80s action hero do his job better, because this is better than 80s action hero's bow. It also encourages more varied gameplay. As well, his shield isn't used that much to protect his teammates. While he isn't a dedicated supporter, I feel like there should be a bit more incentive to use the shield to protect teammates more often, rather than protecting yourself. The shield is much smaller than Citron's, which may be a factor in not using it. So, to simply fix this, just make the shield a little bit wider, not to the extent of Citron's, but still be able to protect your teammates. And so, that's my critique. I hope the issues will be fixed before the game officially launches, and maybe even for PopCap to consider my suggestions to characters. For now, I'm glad that they decided to release an early access so that they could fine-tune the game before releasing it. They had a similar problem with Garden Warfare 2, which may have been a factor to why the PC population in Garden Warfare 2 is so small now, and a reason why they decided to release an early access for this game. Feel free to discuss all these suggestions, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to them. Wait, before you go, there's something that I need to ask you. It's been brought to my attention that the voice actor for Bling Bling from Johnny Test could have also voiced Snapdragon. And I need to know if this is true, so please, if you're watching this, can you ask Lee Takar, which is a voice actor for Bling Bling, on social media if he voiced Snapdragon? I need to know. Please, I asked devs and they haven't answered yet, so I just need to know. Okay, thank you.